Uh, Look, I'm really honoured to be here, and thank you, Stephen, for having me coming along. It's my favourite thing to do, is working with business owners, because you're the risk takers. I'd like to share with you what actually drives me in terms of what I do. Firstly, it's not the content of what we do, but it is what's behind everything I do. Commerce is the most powerful force for good on the planet in the hands of the right people. It's just a fact. Countries lift themselves out of third world poverty only through commerce. Governments can't actually fund countries out of poverty. It's just far too expensive. And so, when you look at the phenomena of outsourcing, for example, we have a team in the Philippines, and there's a whole economic community that exists around our team in the Philippines. They're full-time employed in a country where 80% of the population are on a week-to-week, piecemeal basis. And, I sit with CEOs of mining companies who are about to close a mine and put it on care and maintenance, 2,500 staff at the mine or something like that. And we talk about the enormity of that decision. There's an economic community around that mine. 2,500 employees have families. And so now you've probably got about 5,000 to 7,000 people affected. And there's a whole bunch of suppliers and contract companies. And by simple math, you very rapidly reach a point where there's an economic community of about 12,000 people existing around the commerce of a mine. That the company is simply saying, iron ore price has gone below $40, best put it on care and maintenance where, it's a $40 million burn rate a month, so best put it on care and maintenance, preserve shareholder value, right? It's a very clinical conversation. And the CEO has a responsibility, a fundamental fiduciary responsibility to preserve shareholder value. So if you're burning $40 million cash a month to keep that mine running, you've got to protect shareholder value. But there's 12,000 people in the economic community of that mine. Does that make sense? And so commerce in the hands of the right people is without question, in my mind, the most powerful force for good on the planet. And then a small group of people called entrepreneurs decide they're going to cut ties with being a wage earner and some of the guarantees that brings, certainly the consistency that brings, and go into business for themselves. What a crazy idea that is, right? But commerce only exists because people take the leap. And I just love coming and working with it's one of the reasons I work with small to medium-sized enterprises when, in fact, most of our business for the last 25 years has been with government and corporations, is because two things occur. We know that we can bring the learning of the large corporations to the small business market, but we know we can bring the nimbleness of the small business market to the large corporations. So how many of you are using Ontraport? So I'm an Ontraport user from Sandpepper days. How many of you are using, I was going to say Confusionsoft. How many of you are using Infusionsoft? Okay, well, we'll get you changed. But big business, big companies, who loves Ontraport? Those that are using it, who loves it, right? How much difference does it make to your business? It's the heart of being able to systemize a bunch of stuff. And yet, Fortune 500 companies are trying to figure out what CRM to use, which means they don't have one yet. And if you don't have something like that, but it's far more than a CRM, it's a business system, you don't have nimbleness. And so what you bring to the learning table, if you like, is that nimbleness and that the risk-taking and the inventiveness and everything else. So I get fueled up by all of that when I come and stand with groups like this. So there'll be two levels of learning going on over these two sessions. There'll be your learning and there'll be my learning. Except I'm going to have about 28 teachers and you'll get one. So it's not a fair deal, but it's the way it is, right? It's the way the room's set up. But let me just find out a bit about you before I sort of give you my background so you have some context. And can we do this as a conversation? So just stand up like we're having a conversation, because you normally wouldn't go, up to somebody at a dinner table and stand there and talk to them. So just stand up where you are, and I'm just going to get you to, I just want you to just yell out for me why you went into business. What was the thought? What was the motivation? There was probably a point or one thought, and I don't mind where it comes from. So just, why did you go into business? Someone yell it out. Better lifestyle. Pardon? Redundancy. Quickly. Pardon? To be with your children. Help people. Freedom. Go on. Choice. Knew you could do it yourself. Quick, any more? Flexibility. Someone said serve a purpose. Was that right? Yep. Perfect. So to create something you've always had an image of, you wanted to actually build, create, make. Anything else? Cash. Heard a lot about that in the debrief, right? It's important. Anything else? Travel. Pardon? Your own destiny, your own thing, to make some money. Yeah, so lots of reasons, right? Lots of reasons. But fundamentally, a business has to be commercially sound first to support all the other reasons. It has to be a machine, right? I'll come back to that in a minute. Second question, what's been the most unexpected experience you've had in business? The most unexpected experience? All the negativity? What? Oh, from other people to you? Yep. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. It's also true if you're pregnant. No. So we have 3 adult daughters now, but I couldn't believe when my wife was pregnant with our first daughter how many people just wanted to share their disaster stories. And we're going, seriously, we haven't had this child yet. It'd be good to just hear somebody that successfully got there, because I know there's people on the planet, someone must have managed this. But everyone we met had disasters, right? It's bizarre. It's human nature. So you're doing something that looks like it's a whole lot of fun. I have to bring you down, right? How lonely it is. The loneliness, right? Because it's you sitting up in the middle of the night going, bloody hell, the list is not getting any shorter. And then something new comes online, some other type of media that I gotta get my head around, and I haven't even finished the list on the other stuff. Salaries, wages, bills, everything else. It's a lonely place. Anything else? Unexpected. Right. Yeah. Correct. So a business, and in fact a company, is nothing more than an amplifier of the principal leader. A business or a company is nothing more than the amplifier of the principal leader. So if I've never met the CEO, but I walk through the building before I meet them, I know who I'm going to meet. You just have to look at the people and hear them talking and stuff like that. And money is an echo of value. So, businesses survive entirely upon the quality of the leader and the value created. And if the leader is high quality, you'll see an amplification of that. And if the value is high, money will echo that. And so, if the moment the leader in a business wobbles, the business wobbles. So, when the CEO or the owner has self-doubt creeping in, and if the business sees that, it wobbles. I've done a lot of work with the military, so I've done a lot of strategic work about overseas-based deployment. So when we're sending our troops into Afghanistan and stuff like that. And what military leaders will tell you is you must find the mission. You can't be uncertain if you're leading people into battle. The price of military leadership is not that they might get killed. Military leaders understand the price of military leadership is that you're asking them to kill other people. That's the real price. Let's go over there, kill a bunch of people, sometimes by hand if you're the SAS, and just live with it. And you can't say to them, you know what, I don't really think we should be going. I think head office have got this stuffed up. And it's not looking too good. I'm not sure that the plan's right, but we better go anyway. You just can't do that, right? So that your own self-doubts and who am I to do this? We've got to get a hold of that stuff. It is an unexpected realisation. You never get put through that on wages. You never get tested to that level on wages. One more and then we'll get into the main stuff. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, a business is an organism. There's a guy out of the UK that speaks on this, and a lot of people think a business is like a push bike. You can take bits off and put other bits on, and just it's mechanical, but it's not. It's an organism. It's human, and so it's like a frog. You could take one leg off and the frog will survive. You could take another leg off and put a different kind of leg on, the frog will still survive. But eventually, if you chop too much away and add too many other bits to it, the organism dies. A business is an organism, and so it has a life, and by definition, it wants to step into its life, and you will either hold it back or you'll let it step into its life, which means it'll drive you, or the both of you grow together. They're kind of your choices. Thank you for that. Grab your seats again. There's a really important motivation issue here. If you think about why did you go into business, there's two kinds of motivation, away from and toward. And years ago, I used to do a lot of ultra-distance running, so I kind of tend to get obsessed about anything I get involved in. And ultra-distance running is, multiple marathons in a row and stuff. And I was doing this run for charity. It was 100 kilometres, but it was 250 laps around an athletics track. And we didn't reverse direction often enough, and my left knee and my right, if you run in one direction long enough, you do silly damage to your inside knee and your outside ankle. And I haven't run since, but, when you're on the starting line, you're about to run 100 kilometres, and so you start running, it's 5 laps for every 2 kilometres. And I don't listen to anything when I run, I pay attention to technique and everything else. And you start counting. So you're running 100 kilometres, you started on the start line. What number do you suppose you're counting? What would you imagine you would count? No, you count upwards. You count the distance you've covered. You go, I've run 1 kilometre, I've run 2 kilometres, I've run 10, I've run 15, I've run 20, right? Because you've covered that distance. It's like an automatic thing. And I ran through the 50-kilometre mark really comfortably. I was doing, I was on a great pace, and I was thinking, this is actually going to be easy. Now, the most I'd run in preparation for that one was 75k. So you typically run about 3/4 of the distance in preparation. You never run the full distance in training. So I ran through the 50k mark thinking, this is really good. Feeling really comfortable, right? And a funny thing happened. Imagine when you run through 50k. So what number would you start counting? As you run through 50k, I've run 50, then you start counting, I've got 40 left, and 30 left, and 20 left, right? So at the start, you're running away from. The motivation is simply to get as far away from this thing as you possibly can, called the start line. And the truth is, any direction would have gotten me away from that start line. Does that make sense? I could have run in any direction, and I would be getting distance away from the start line. But the further away you get, the less the desire to get away from it, it diminishes. And so away from motivation is often driven by fear. I just want to get away from that thing, and it's not solid enough. Because if you're trying to get away from a really stressful corporate role or some kind of stuff going on in your life, any direction will count, right? That includes drugs and alcohol and abusive relationships and everything else. It still gets you away from it. So then you run toward, you get through the 50-kilometre mark and you start running toward, and you start counting down to the end. This is called toward motivation. How many directions can I run in to get there? Just one. I need to head in that direction. And the 3/4 mark is where everything tends to go wrong in everything. The performance curve tells us that things tend to go wrong at the 3/4 mark, and most people fall out of long distance runs at about the 3/4 mark. 50k felt great, 70k started to tighten up, 75k was really tightening up, and then the last 20 was excruciating. And I'd also started to lose my mental faculties a little bit, and so people from my support team were coming out to just run with me one at a time. And they just kept blabbing away, and I don't like people talking when I'm running, and I'm going, would you just shut up, But they knew, and I'm going, 80's pretty good. Like, I've run 80k, that's pretty good. And they go, you just run one more and see what happens. And then you just run one more. Now, the team got me through the last 20k, and then I crossed the finish line. I didn't walk for a week. But if the finish line hadn't been there, would I have kept running? No way, right? So you must have a reason for going into business that ignited the energy, that had you going, stuff this. This is not good enough. That can't continue. but you must have something you're running towards, which is the big idea. Does that make sense? And, it's just, and actually as I listened to a lot of the reasons for people going to business, there was an over-representation of away from. There was an over-representation of away from. So, with respect, redundancy is an away from reason. It's like I've been made redundant. What do I do now? I can't stay unproductive. Yeah, I've got to find something, right? But it'd be better if I looked for something that I could really buy into. Is this making sense? It's a really powerful concept. When we look at the business growth curve, what often happens, I'll see if I can get out of the way, is people have this entrepreneurial seizure. And they go, I'll go into business for myself. And often it's no better thought through than that. I'll go into business. And the revenue line goes downwards initially. The money coming to you goes downwards. This is infancy. But because you might have had a really good idea or a level of determination, and you just might have good people around you, the revenue curve starts to turn. And it turns upwards. And the market starts talking about you and customers know about you and things start going well, right? But then you hit this wall, and if you don't deal with it, your revenue line could drop off. What would you imagine that wall is? Pardon? Well, no, we're not even a quarter of the way through yet. This wall is volume. People have started hearing about you. Customers are happy. They're buying from you. They're telling other people about you. You've had that early enthusiastic kind of splurge of success. You go, this is great. Who knew business could be so easy? And all you've really actually done is opened the door. And then lots of other people start coming to you going, I've heard you're really great. And your business starts to break at the seams because you never built it for volume. You built it for you. Does that make sense? And so volume hits you. Now, to get rid of that line, we've got to go through adolescence. And adolescence is all about structure, systems, and rules, right? What is it that adolescents, like real-life adolescents, what's their number one objective in life? No, they're not thinking about becoming an adult. They do want to have fun and all that sort of stuff, but they have a principal objective in life. So the imprint period, 0 to 7, is all about learning and figuring out and absorbing information and watching the adults and mimicking what they do to figure out how to get through life. But the adolescent's role, that phase of life, has one objective, and that is to break your rules. So in imprint period, I'm going to learn by doing what you do, and then in the adolescent years, I'm going to test that by breaking what you do. And for most adolescents, they find out breaking the rules doesn't work so well. So as they move into the early adulthood years, as they start to mature, they go, okay, back to what we do, right? So we're trying to implement systems and structure into businesses during adolescence when the business is trying to break all the rules. This is a really challenging period of time. But if you do get good systems in place, you can get that kind of exponential growth. If you can get good structure and good order. And then you hit another barrier, which is what? So your business has gone crazy, you've got great systems and structure, but you hit another barrier. And if you don't do the right thing at this point, if you don't either sell or reinvent, you will hit the decline of the maturity years. Because what you've done by building your systems is made your business visible. And so other people can just copy it and drop price as a primary way of competing in the marketplace. And now you find yourself in a market delivering value at a price point that the customer is no longer prepared to pay. Does that make sense? Excuse me. This is the right time to sell the business off or reinvent it so that you can have this whole different level of growth. So while people are copying the rules that you made in the first place, you're on another set of rules, an entirely different game. Now, when people buy a franchise, they're really trying to buy into this adolescence period already prepared. That's all a franchise is, right? But if you buy into a franchise straight out of a wage, you haven't built the muscle that got built through here. So it's no surprise that franchises often don't do well It's all making sense. Where would you put yourself along that curve? So how many people would say they're in adolescence? How many are in infancy still? And how many are in maturity? Okay, here's the problem with maturity. If your market's mature, you're already in maturity. You just could be a babe playing in a mature market. That's sobering, isn't it? So, you've got to find your idea. You've got to find that point of distinction. What is wildly different about you that allows people to buy into your business? So it's interesting. We spend, this is a sample of some of our clients, we've spent about the last 25 years working with government and big business and small and medium-sized enterprises almost entirely on what happens inside that curve, inside that business curve. And, I'd like to say that the thinking in bigger enterprises is way better than the thinking in small to medium-sized enterprises, but it's actually about the same. The issues are just more complex. I'm working on a project right now with the government in Western Australia and the wine industry to double the value of export out of the state over the next 4 years. I'm working with a large manufacturing company in Australia, heavy industrial and defence manufacturing, who, they're about a $1.6 billion business. They're currently building 15% of the US Navy fleet, an Australian company. And the thinking and the challenges there are just the same as the challenges in small to medium-sized enterprises. When I sit one-to-one with a CEO, the number one issue that comes up, talk about the self-confidence thing, the number one issue that comes up is CEOs often vocalise to me, when will they figure out that I don't really have all the answers? When will the staff work that out? Or, they've got to go and get the board to spend another $40 million on a bit of infrastructure or something, and the CEO can't say for sure that they will get the return they want out of that. But how do I get the board to believe me, yet I'm not sure myself? So the whole self-doubt thing creeps in. And it's just the complexity of business. So two things drive success in almost all of those environments. And the two most important systems in your business is firstly your system for thinking. Now, systems are both tangible and intangible, but your system for thinking, the quality of your thinking, the quality of the big idea a business is only as strong as the thinking that's driving it. Your business cannot exceed the level of your thinking performance. The thinking behind the big idea and the thinking behind the business. And the second system is your system for influencing people. So the success of your business is entirely dependent upon your capacity to get other people to make choices in your favour. So your capacity to get investors to invest, to choose to invest in your business. Your capacity to get the regulators to choose to give you the licence to operate. Your capacity to get staff to choose to commit and perform. Your capacity to get customers to choose to buy from you. Now, all of those choices are free will. They get to make the choice. Your job is to influence. So if you have a great system for thinking and a great system for influencing, you'll be okay. Is that making sense? Right. So, my background is interesting. I spent the early part of my working life in electronics and electrics. And then I had this seizure. I thought I'd be a teacher. And I went back and did a Bachelor of Education. And they sent me to a high school in Perth, which is designed to prove to people like me that I don't have what it takes to be a teacher for 40 years. And they put all the students in the state that they need for that into that one school, right? And then they put you in front of them. So very quickly I thought, I can't teach adolescents. I need to work with adults. So I went back and I got another degree in adult education and training. My grad dip work is in business and marketing, and I lectured in Taven at university for a while. And then went into corporate roles. We corporatised the Water Authority. We shifted it from being a public utility to a commercial enterprise. And then then I became an executive manager for CSR Building Materials. I ran the building materials business in WA and South Australia for a number of years. And then about 25 years ago, we started our consulting business. And that's really what we've been doing ever since. Principally, we do large-scale strategic planning, organisational change and leadership, and sales and marketing for companies. So the thinking end and the influencing end of the business. And we've developed a way of thinking and communicating that is heavily based on visual models, and I'll talk about that a little later. But over time working with those companies, principally in my heart, so I was teaching physics and chemistry and math subjects. So I like evidence and I like structure and I like proof. And so as we've worked with organisations, we've uncovered some rules that are interesting. And these are thinking rules in the system for thinking. So the thinking laws, so Stephen said, well, just don't play by the rules, but there are rules of human behaviour that if you choose to ignore them, you'll pay a price. The first law is the law of distinction. Success absolutely demands that you stand out. It's a busy marketplace today. And if we were talking, anyone in here accountants? Any accountants in here? Okay, but are you over that? Yeah. Great, fantastic. That's okay then, I can say what I'm about to say, right? Accountants, every accountant is struggling because their business is going to just get lost to technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And ultimately, the Australian Tax Office will no longer require people to submit tax returns, the PAYG tax returns. It will happen, right? So accountants are trying to become advisors and they all think they're different. And the market just doesn't care. They're just accountants, right? So the market demands that they find a way of standing out. And if I said to you right now, in less than 10 words, tell me how you stand out, what would you say? So to prove, I believe everything has a system, a structure, a pattern. And to prove that, my wife and I started thinking, what's the most random thing I could think of? And I'm going to see if it's got a pattern. And then I thought, luck. Luck's pretty random. And so I started examining that. And it turns out luck has a lot of patterns. And so we started entering competitions, to win a car and a trip and stuff like that. And to date, we've won over $1 million worth of prizes. We average about $50,000 a year. Today tonight, I've run 2 stories on us. A Current Affair have run a story on us. Regularly at Christmas time and stuff, the morning shows will ring up and ask my wife and I to go up to the studio in Perth, the TV studio in Perth, and they do a live cross about how you can do all your Christmas shopping and win prizes as well. We've had prizes that you can't buy, so go to a concert and then have dinner with the performers or whatever. We won a drive-in Rally Australia for me one year, so they kitted out a car and trained me, and then a 10-time Australian rally champion was my navigator, and we drove Rally Australia until I crashed the car. It was a hoot. And, we've won 2 trips to London for the family and 2 trips to Disney World. When you go to Disney World as a guest, they really look after you, like unbelievably. They pick you up at the airport in a limo and take you there and give you a room and all that sort of stuff. And then you say, how do we get to the theme park? And they just go to get the limo. And when we come back, where do we get the bus? And they say, no, the limo will be waiting for you. So, they just, and here's some money to spend and everything else. Our girls were young the first time we went. They go, we're going to bring our children back to Disney World. And we went, it won't be like this. It was just... So winning stuff is the coolest thing, and it's all tax deductible, and it's absolutely predictable. So if we enter a competition and the prize is a trip, you can't transfer those. And so we don't enter them if I'm not available, like if our diary doesn't allow it. Because it'd be nothing worse than winning a trip and not being able to take it. My wife and our eldest daughter flew to LA and went to the pre-screening of a Kate Hudson movie with her and the producers and stuff, and then did the red carpet event for the actual preview. And if we teach people what to do, they typically win a trip within about 3 months, because it's predictable. No. But I tell you this, it's marketing. It's marketing. 25 words or less is a headline without copy. So they say, hey, tell us in 25 words or less why you want a new Hyundai Accent. And most people go, I'm a uni student, I've got a clapped out old bomb, I need another car. No. They're running these competitions not to get you to buy. They're running these competitions to get the consumers to give them taglines that other consumers will relate to. And we realised that when we discovered that Beans Means Heinz was a winning competition entry. So bumper to bumper, end to end, Hyundai Accent, a girl's best friend, will win you that car. And marketing tells you if you've tested and measured and it worked, what should you do? If you've tested and measured a headline and it worked, what should you do? No, use it again, right? Yeah. So bumper to bumper, end to end, Toyota Echo, or whatever it is, can't remember what it was, a girl's best friend will win it for you. We've won 5 trips with the same 25 words or less. We just change the brand and the product and that sort of thing. And we send off entries and and then we will ring them. If we don't win, we will ring them and say, we put a lot of effort into that, can we get it back? And they say, well, you have to pay to get it back, ship it back, and we go, absolutely. And they say, tell us what the entry is, and we describe it. And if they instantly know our entry by the description, they go, oh, that was a great entry, it was so close. The one that won was like this. What have we just discovered? Well, we found out what they looked for, and we found out ours at least stood out. Because if yours doesn't even stand out, you've got no chance. Does that make sense? Now, there's a whole lot of other stuff behind this that's a part of the pattern. When you send an entry in matters, as in the timing, send them in the last 2 days, there's reasons for that. But the first law is law of distinction, it must stand out. So the number one thing is you've got to stand out. Interestingly, if I talk about it, people will do some of the stuff we teach, and they'll say, that competition thing didn't win. I didn't win anything. And I've learnt to ask 2 really critical questions. The first question is, have you entered anything yet? And 80% of them go, not yet. And I go, that's a really important first step in the system. And then the second question is, why haven't you entered anything yet? And they go, because I never win anything. I go, I know why. Isn't that bizarre? Here's what you need to do. I'm not winning anything yet. Have you entered anything yet? No. One lady said, I have put it out to the universe. I'm going, the universe can't fill out a form. They need you to pick up the pen and fill out the form or go on the keyboard, right? So you must stand out. The second law, every business should be built to win. I'm going to cover this off in a model in a minute. But you're not in business to participate. You're absolutely in the business to win. And that means you've got to try and be number one in your market. Winning is being number one in the market. Winning is being profitable. Winning is being able to take that profit and turn it into unencumbered cash, money that you can do whatever you want with, without it having an obligation to reinvest it back into the business. Winning means your staff are working in a company they love working in and would rather be in than any other company. Winning means the regulators trust you. Winning means the market trusts you. But every business must be built, should be built to win. The law of accurate thinking, a business is only as good as the system of thinking behind it, including the big idea. Your business can't outgrow your thinking. Your thinking has to outgrow itself. And then let the business come with it. I'll show you a little image of that in a minute. And the law of context. Context gives everything meaning. Imagine you've bought a brand new car, first new car you've ever bought, and it's got 19-inch alloy rims. If this doesn't make sense to any of you, it doesn't matter. If you're a cars person, this will all matter. But it's got 19-inch alloy rims. It's got a deep, dark, metallic blue Duco on it. It's got the darkest street legal window tint you can possibly have. You picked it up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon because the neighbours are all out watering their lawns at that time. And you bought a new pair of sunglasses before you went to pick it up just to kind of match. You checked yourself in the plate glass window of the dealership as you leave, and it looks great. And as you drive home, you've got to go through this little patch of wooded area, this little bush bit. And as you're driving through the bush, this 10-year-old kid steps out of the bushes and hurls a rock at your car. And it hits the headlight and breaks that, and somehow defying physics, it skips across the bonnet and gouges it, and then it clips the windscreen, and that crack appears across the windscreen. And the kid just stands there and stares at you. What do? Right. So I was doing some work with a child protection agency in one of the states of Australia, not Western Australia or Victoria or the Northern Territory or Queensland or South Australia. And one of the guys down the front, when I asked the question, just went like this, just run him over. And everybody else went, oh! You can't say that in our environment. And so I went on to give the second part of the story. So as most people say, well, you'd jump out and you'd grab him and you'd shake him like mad and say, what the hell do you think you're doing? And while you're shaking him, this kid says, sorry, mister, I didn't want to do that, but I was out for a walk after school with my mum like we do every day, and she's collapsed in the bushes over there, and I don't even know if she's alive. And I'm a 10-year-old kid, and I've tried to stop about 15 cars, and they think I'm just mucking around and I'm desperate. Now what do you do? Right, so the guy that went like this, we have to go and make sure his mother's okay, and everyone went, oh, thank goodness. And you know how when you rescue something, you should just shut up? He chose not to. He went, you've got to make sure the mother's okay. Everyone went, oh, thank goodness. And then he went, because if there's any chance of getting money out of this family, you need her alive. So he's clearly in the wrong career. And so at least we established something in that session, right? It was a good learning for him. So here's the thing. If the kid is out for a walk with his mum and he thinks she's collapsed and he thinks she could be dead and he hurls a rock at the car, hurling a rock at a car as a way of communication is dangerous under all circumstances, isn't it? But he's desperate and dangerous. The context gives the action meaning. But if he was just hanging around with his mates after school because no one cares where he is, he's delinquent and dangerous. The context gives the action meaning. So context gives everything meaning. The context of the marketplace and what you do gives meaning to your big idea. And one of the things we see in businesses so often is that the thinking hasn't clarified the context. Does that make sense? Now, my context is I think commerce is the most powerful force for good on the planet in the hands of the right people. And it's interestingly where I started with you. How many people bought into that when I was talking about it? It gives meaning to everything else I'm about to cover with you. Does that make sense? So context gives everything meaning. And the law of pictures, we understand through imagery. A dog hears a noise and smells a scent and it goes on alert, but it only fights or runs away once it sees the danger. And two people can be having a conversation verbally and be on completely the opposite angle, even though they might be agreeing, but as soon as you put the thing in front of them and they can see it, everything lines up. And so we've made a really deliberate effort about using imagery, visual thinking models in business to create better systems for thinking and to create better systems for selling. And I want to take you through some of those things in a minute. But let's have a look at this idea of winning. So I played hockey in my younger years and played for WA, and I played alongside a guy by the name of Rick Charlesworth. Anyone know who Rick Charlesworth is? Rick's an interesting guy, a fierce competitor. He opened the batting for WA in the Sheffield Shield for 9 years, and during the same time for 11 years he played hockey for Australia, and for 9 of those he was the captain of the Australian hockey team. Whilst he also studied and became a general practice doctor. Talk about underachievement, right? And the only reason he probably didn't play cricket for Australia is because he was already playing hockey for Australia. It's hard to mix the two. Then he finished his sporting career. He became a federal parliamentarian for 10 years. Then he finished that. He became a high-performance coach in the AFL. Then he finished that and he became coach of the Australian women's hockey team and coached them to 2 Olympic gold medals, everything in between. And they are still, to date, one of the most dominant sporting teams Australia's ever produced. And then he finished with them, and his great regret is he never won gold as a player for Australia, and he coached the Australian men's hockey team for 6 years. They won everything but the Olympic gold. So it's still his great regret. And if someone like that talks about high performance, it's worth listening to. Would you agree? Right? So Rick was speaking at a breakfast once, and I was following him. And while he was speaking, I captured his talk into a model. So when I talk about visual models, this is what I'm talking about. I captured his entire presentation into a model, and then I decided to scrap my talk and just put the model up. So I drew it on a flip chart and talked about that. And afterwards, Rick went, "Where did you get that from?" I went, "It was your talk, Rick." And he went, "Oh, I thought it looked familiar." The next obvious question would be what? From him. "Yeah, can I have the model?" "Yeah, well, pay me." So there's some principles about winning, but the thing that elite athletes do differently, and I work with a couple of national sporting teams and a lot of state teams, and the thing about elite athletes is they all know what winning looks like. like really clearly what winning looks like. Now, in their world, it means you win the gold medal or you win the championships, but you're number one. And the question I would put to you is, how many people in your business, including you, are crystal clear about what winning looks like? I've sat with executive teams of very large companies and said, I'm going to go around the table and I want each of you to tell me what winning looks like for this company, and had 7 different answers. And if you've got 7 different answers that might not be wildly apart, but if you've got 7 people that instead of being, hang on, how do I get the fingers lined up? Instead of being exactly overlapped, are just a little bit out, what does that look like once it's out into the rest of the organisation? And so, I got to the CEO and I said, well, clearly this team isn't clear about what winning looks like. And he said, that's true, and it's kind of, he said, but for me too, I'm not, what does winning look like? So in your big idea, you need to know what winning looks like, and so does every member of your team, and so does every supplier, and so does anyone that writes copy for you, or anyone that builds a website for you, or anybody that does anything for you. You need to be able to preface it by saying, here's what winning looks like. But what we do is we teach children to come to sport through participation, where we don't keep score or anything like that. Now, it's only the adults that are not keeping score to make themselves feel better. The children know who won. But in participation, we say, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, it's just being involved. And then we step into, the projectors are a bit faint, but we step into competition. This is amateur competition, and amateur teams lose on the weekend and change nothing. We'll just do it all again, train the same way. And most businesses are in participation and competition. They're either playing to participate or playing to win some, lose some. And if you play to win some, lose some, what will happen? You'll win some and lose some, right? So the jump from competition to winning is innovation. And innovation in order to disrupt your marketplace, to stand out, to dominate. And actually, people don't like the idea of talking about dominating. It feels a bit awkward to them. But if you want to win in business, you need to think about how you can dominate your space. And there's a great question that Charlie asks. He says, what seems impossible, but if you could change it, if you could do it, it would change everything. What seems impossible, but if you could do it, it'd change everything. When they were going to the Atlanta Olympics, it was going to be hot and humid, and the international hockey community had decided that it would just be a low-tempo style of hockey. And Charlie said to his coaching staff, if we could change it, what seems impossible, but if we could change it, it would change everything. One of the coaching staff said, if we had a high-frequency interchange, because in those days hockey really didn't use the interchange. You put the reserve on when someone got injured and that was it, right? If we could have a high-frequency interchange so we could get everybody off the field for at least 8 minutes through the game to give them recovery time. Now, the Olympic Committee had allowed hockey to have an extra 3 reserves, so they could have 4 on the bench because of the conditions. And so the Australian team created a high-frequency interchange, and everybody learnt it. They all knew the order of it. And they also knew how the field had to shift position to cover everything as certain people were off the field. Now, Leanne Tooth was a dominant goal scorer, and everyone else knew it. Give Lee the ball inside the D and she'll score. So you can imagine other teams are gearing up to compete against that, right? What does the other team do when Lee takes her 8 minutes? And the whole field shifts. None of the players know where they're running to or who they're running on. Rochelle Hawkes, the captain of the Australian team, was the dominant inside forward. What does the other team do when she leaves the field for 8 minutes? And as soon as she comes back on, they go, boy, it's back to normal, but it's not because somebody else left. So it created absolute disruption, and then at the same time, the Australian Institute of Sport created the ice vest. And it was the first time in international sport that had been used. So they were coming off for 8 minutes and wearing ice vests and taking their core body temperature down, and 70% of Australia's goals were scored in the second half. And they won the gold. What seems impossible, but if you could do it, it would change everything. System for thinking. Systems for thinking require great questions, not answers. The right answer to the wrong question is still the wrong answer. What seems impossible, but if we could do it, it would change everything. So, I'm into physics. This is a pendulum swinging. Now, if we keep, mathematically, we can work out what the arc of that pendulum would be, can't we? Those of you into physics would know that. But the moment we add another pendulum to it, the bottom pendulum just gets weird. It does weird stuff. And it seems to be completely random. But the truth is, if you start that pendulum from exactly the same spot every time, it will follow the same path. But it has to be precisely the same spot. Both arms, angle, the velocity that you drop it at and everything else. It has to be precisely the same. It will follow the same arc every time. The problem is that we often don't start systems from the same place every time. We build systems for the process, not for the start and finish. Does that make sense? The thinking behind systems should be, where does it start and where do we want it to finish? Now let's figure out the middle bit. But we often build systems based on the middle bit. But we don't put enough thought into where's the starting point. Think about marketing and your funnels. People don't put anywhere near enough thought into where is the starting point for the funnel and how do we make that stable. What is known here is that there's got to be an anchor point in the business. If we move that anchor, nothing becomes predictable. Is that true? Yes or no? Well, that was like an Australian response. So I speak in the US a lot. And, in the US, if you say to an audience, I need someone to help me, 15 people rush at you. And they're enthusiastic and they get up. And as they come to you, go, now, you're going to be naked at the end of this demonstration. They go, yep, no good. And so you pick one and 14 walk back dejectedly. And you do the demonstration, whatever it is. And when you finish, you go, thanks very much. You can take your seat. And everyone goes, good job, and they high five and everything else. In Australia, you go, I need a volunteer. And everyone goes. And they keep looking down. If you just bore into the back of somebody's head with your eyes, eventually they feel it. And they look up and you go, thanks very much. And they almost go, oh. And you drag them out and you say, listen, all we're going to do is shake hands, that's all. And that's like extracting teeth. And you do the demonstration, you say, thanks very much, go back to your seat, and everyone else goes, crawler. It's just, we have different cultures, right? In America, you say, give them a round of applause. Yeah, right? In Australia, you say, give them a round of applause. They go, really? Like, God, that's effort. I'll give you 3. So when in Australia we say, does that make sense? We go, oh, yeah, sort of. Now, it might actually make a lot of sense to you, but I need to calibrate this based on, is this making sense to you? If we move the anchor point, does the whole thing become completely unpredictable? So what is the anchor point in your business? You. More specifically, your thinking. Your thinking is the anchor in your business. And if you're not growing it and expanding it and challenging it, then your business can't grow and expand and challenge. What's the starting point? The harsh line of reality. Don't dress up what's going on today. Be clear about it. I'll give you a worksheet that you can take away in a little while to help with that. So how you think matters even more. So we need that anchor point, which is you, but how you think matters even more. And business today is highly visual. So if you can think visually, you can bring people along more readily. And there's this truth that whoever visualizes the best business wins. So if you can paint the picture for other people, you win. So let me talk about what a visualization of a business might be. Imagine you're a builder. I know there's some here. But a client says, I've got this idea in my head of a house I want. Build it for me. What's the likelihood that will work? It's not going to work, right? And so then the client says, well, look, what I can do is I can explain it to you in words. I can give you a whole lot of detailed description about it, and I'll even write it out for you. Is that going to work? No, you won't get the house you want. So the smart builder says, I'll draw you a plan. And a plan is a visualization of the house. It's a model. It's a visual model of the house. Is it likely that that house will get built? Far more likely than this, right? And so the builders that draw the best plans and renders, the builders that give the best visualization of the property before the property is built will win. So they're using fly-throughs now, generated on computers and stuff. But who's built a house? True or true, the best vision, now price matters, it always matters, but value matters as well. But if you can't see it and see yourself living in it before it's even built, you're not going to build the thing. Yeah, cool, right? Because the person that can visualize it wins, right? And so from the plan, we get a house. But without this, we don't know if they've heard us properly or not. We don't know if we're on the same page. The more we can visualize the thinking, the better we are. And so the question is, maybe, do you think in words or pictures? 83% of the world around us, the stimulus comes through the eyes. 50% of the brain's reflex system is attached to the optic nerve. Only 11% is auditory. So people talk about visual, auditory and kinesthetic, but in truth, we're all visual first. And that's what we do with that visual input. So in other words, we receive the information visually, but we may process it auditorily. In other words, we talk ourselves through it. But the world around us comes through our eyes, most significantly. And if we're not tapping into visual representation in the thinking process and the selling process, we're missing a big channel. We're missing a big chunk. And the eyes are highly emotional. The limbic system filters everything that gets through to the neocortex, and the limbic system likes stories and pictures. Our oldest form of recorded communication is cave art, right? So the old brain and the limbic system love stories and pictures. And if we're not using visual, we're just not tapping in. So how do you think? What's a system for thinking? A model is a system for thinking. Let me paint a picture of business in one model. So who would like a wildly successful business by show of hands? Great. And who would like a business that has market domination by show of hands? Great. And who would like to have a business that is predictably profitable by show of hands? Fabulous. Who would like a business that has a certain level of growth about it? Great. Who'd like to know how to do that? Fabulous. So the first thing you must do is sell successfully. Sell successfully. Don't just sell, but sell successfully. And if you can sell successfully and serve impeccably. Now, serve impeccably means delivering to the market in a way that they're going to be thrilled about and in a way that allows you to be profitable. So it doesn't overuse resources, but delivers in an impeccable manner. If we sell successfully and serve impeccably, do you think we might dominate the market? You bet. And then the third thing we need to do is scale intelligently. Now, scale and growth are not the same thing. Growth is proportional. For every bit of growth, you've got to add more staff or whatever. Scale is growth that does not require additional resources. So the third thing we've got to do is scale intelligently. If we sell successfully and scale intelligently, will that give us certain growth? Yeah. And if we serve impeccably and scale intelligently, will it give us predictable profit? Yeah, right? So there's three key chunks: sell successfully, serve impeccably, and scale intelligently. And there's only three things on each of those models. People are writing, but they can have the slides. Is that so they don't have to write? Is that okay? Yeah. It's just a whole lot better if you're not trying to write. So, but it'll only be what's on the slides. So any notes you need to make around that, do it. But please don't try and copy stuff off the slides. So to sell successfully, there's three key chunks. You must be able to move your market. You must be able to move the market to you. That's marketing. You need to be able to get them to come to you. You must be able to convert like crazy. That's the sales part. And you must be able to build your numbers. So you need to be able to scale your sales team before you can scale anything else. It's got to be more than just you selling or you and one other, right? In terms of serve impeccably, you must be amazing. The business needs to be amazing. It needs to have such a high level of delivery that people go beyond wow when they actually see it. And you must control the flow of value through the business and the flow of work and the flow of money. So value flows in one direction, money flows in the other. You must be able to control that. How effective are your finance systems? How effective are your quality assurance systems? How effective is the workflow management? So systems, right? And then you must be able to manage the margins. Control of cost versus revenue. And inside of managing the margins is performance management. Leading people, right? And then in terms of scale intelligently, you must be able to master the money. So not just in the short term, but long term. So capital expenditure, investment versus operating expenditure and investment. And being able to see money in the marketplace, but knowing exactly where you're at right now. You must be able to set strategy really clearly and cleverly. And then the most important thing, which Stephen spoke about earlier, you must be able to implement skillfully. Project management. You must be able to run great projects. 70% of all projects fail. You need to be in the 30% that gets them done and implemented. Now, if you deliver the 3 accelerators, I call them, around the outside of the 3 pillars, you'll have a business in the middle. Is that a fairly reasonable model of a business? Now, that's one of our genius models. Now, do you realise what's been happening in the last few minutes? And you might have seen it. So, just by the way, if you went around the outside, how many people would say who would be red, amber, or green? So, who would be red in terms of really being able to move the market? Red zone, not good. Who would be amber? So, amber's kind of okay. Who would be amber in terms of moving the market? Okay, who's green? And then a whole lot of you don't know. Is that true? Right. How many of you would be in green zone in terms of conversion success? 1, amber. And red? Okay. How many would be in green zone in terms of building the sales numbers? 1, amber. Quite a few. Red? Okay. Now, if I went around the outside and did all 9, have I just discovered something about my market? Right? Because you realise what's been happening over the last 5 or so minutes I've been selling. This is called a genius model. When we teach the genius model, we taught the genius model to a guy in an electrical company, and he used it 2 days later and sold a $500,000 deal. Conversion rates when people sell in a room with this are up above 60%. Genius model. It's capturing your big idea in a visual model that allows you to talk to the market. If you explain that model to a copywriter, is it likely you'll get better copy than you've ever had before? If you explain it to staff, is it likely you'll get a different level of engagement by staff in the business? It becomes, your big idea is in here, the sweet spot and the petals, which is all about the client, and then it moves from the client in the centre out to your business around the outside. So your business is client-centric, not you-centric. It's a model. It's a thinking model. Now, I have way more content normally in presentations than we have time for, so I want to push through. But just any quick questions before we move into the last little bit about anything so far. What I'm suggesting to you is models themselves are the systems of thinking. Unpacking your business into models. How difficult would it be to explain business to you? Now, if you were a whole bunch of PAYG wage earners and you're thinking about going into business, and I have you in a room and I say, let me show you what business is about, and I just did what I did in the last 5 minutes, would you have a pretty good idea about where your challenges are going to be and what you're not good at and what you need to be good at? If I just tried to explain it to you in words, how would that have landed? So what happens with a model is, if we're having a conversation, this is confrontational, but with a model, it's the two of us looking at the model. And now it's us understanding this. We shift from either selling or convincing to facilitating. And you might have noticed me shift energy as I came down the stairs to start talking about this. It was a really deliberate shift of energy. And I shifted energy and started immediately in your sweet spot. If I start in my sweet spot, the only person that matters to is me. But if I start in your sweet spot, the whole model now is about you. And here's one of the truths about models. The paradigm of any one part of the model is the paradigm of the whole model. So if that had started, if the sweet spot, the middle had been about me and what my business does, the whole model is about me. But if the paradigm is that you're in the middle, the whole model is about you, even though we're talking about the 9 key things we help people do around the outside. Does that make sense? The other thing is, if a model falls over in just one part of the model, the whole model falls over. So when you really work out a great model, you've got an incredibly powerful tool to discuss and think and work through. If you capture your business in a single model, all of a sudden every decision you make needs to fit inside that somewhere. So for example, someone says, you should buy this, whatever it is, right? Will it help me move my market? Yes or no? Will it help me convert like crazy? Yes or no? Will it help me build my numbers in sales? Yes or no? Will it help me be amazing, control the flow, manage the money, master the money, manage the margin, master the money, set the strategy, implement skillfully. No. Well, then I'm not buying it. Makes life simple, doesn't it? Pardon? Yeah, it should be embedded into your brain, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do is picture your perfect business. And I will just give you a handout in a minute, because you should have in your mind a picture of the perfect business. And it does require you to have a clean sense of reality. After the break, I'm going to step into sales using models specifically, right? So when we come back from the break, the second half is about your system for influencing. So how you can use models really deliberately for selling. And I'm going to give you 2 models that you can use immediately. One will increase urgency in the sale. The other one will help you position price and value. But for the moment, I just want to wrap this up in terms of the thinking. So against those laws of thinking that we put up, and what you're going to have in front of you, don't be scared about the writing on the side. That's just a guide. You may or may not use that. But what you have in front of you is a worksheet. It's a where are we now to where do we want to be model. So what's today's reality? What's my desired reality for the future? And then what's the focus I need to have on a quarter-by-quarter basis to get there? But it's a dartboard. A dartboard's a model, right? So if you look at the dartboard, it's got 4 key areas. So cash, the money. So how much cash flow, which is blood in the veins, and then how much profit, how much money do you get to take out of the business? Customers, how effective is your marketing? The acquisition of leads. And conversion, how effective is your selling in terms of customers? Then capability, how effective is your team, the people, and how effective are your systems? And then the 4th one is course, the course you're on. How clear are you about your focus, your projects, in terms of growing your business, and what's your execution like? And then it's simply using the scale on there to go from red to amber to green, all aiming towards the bullseye in the middle, if you like. And what I'd ask you to do on the reality, today's reality, is using that scale, be honest with yourself. Using that scale, just put a number in the circle for each of those things. So if it's, let's say we're looking at marketing and leads, and it's a 3, I'm still getting really inconsistent results, I would put a 3 in the little circle in the red zone there. So we're going to get a sense of what your business is like, red, amber, or green. Let me just do it here. Seconds. So if I might say my marketing is pretty average. It's a 3. I'm just going to put a 3. Oops. I'm just going to put a 3 in there. My conversion is not bad. It's a 4. I'm going to put a 4 in the amber zone there, just using the scale and the color coding. In terms of focus and projects, I don't really know what I'm doing. It's a 1, and therefore execution is probably a 1 or a 2 at best. In terms of process and systems, it's kind of getting there but inconsistent. I'm going to make them 4. My team is great. I'm going to give them an 8. Cash flow is average, so 5. And profit is still pretty low, so it's a 3. So it's a harsh line of reality for today. Where is your business at today, just on a simple scoreboard basis? Can you take a couple of minutes and just fill out today's reality? This is a thinking tool. Just a couple of minutes to fill out today's reality, if you wouldn't mind. So just follow the colours in the scales to place it on the target and put the numbers in. And it shouldn't take you very long. If your thinking is sound, you should know exactly where your business is right now. Pardon? Oh, the eyes. Who found it difficult to actually put some numbers down and be real about that? You know, it's a 3 or it's a 4 or whatever. Totally. Yeah. We have to be clear about the starting point. Remember the pendulum? We've got to be crystal clear about where we're starting. Otherwise, you end up in the wrong place just because you started in the wrong place. The number one rule about change management is be clear about where you're starting. But if you have a distorted view of your business or the market, now I spend all day, every day with business leaders, and I've lost count of the number of the times that people say to me, we're the market leader, or we have an outstanding product. We have, it's driving us mad. The market's buying on price, and they don't appreciate the value of our product. And I say to them, well, in less than 10 words, describe the value to me. And they'll say, quality and service. Now, if that's not the biggest yawn I've ever heard, what is? And as soon as someone says quality and service to you, what's your thought? Same, pardon? Cliched, right? So as the buyer, we hear quality and service, we go, yawn, cliche, same old, same old. We come to business owner, we go, quality and service. Right? Not good enough. They're buying on price because you're not distinguishing yourself. I went and I'm a John Maxwell trained leadership coach. John is probably one of the biggest leadership coaches in the US. And when you go to his training, they say, come along prepared to deliver a 5-minute talk on something significant in your life. You can't use PowerPoint or anything. And it has to land, it has to have impact. And there's like 700 people in the room. And you do your talk for 5 minutes. And everyone scores you, and the score is done with an electronic device, and your score goes up on the screen behind you straight away, out of 10, right? Now, everybody got over 7, and we were so excited with ourselves. We gave ourselves a huge round of applause, and there was high-fiving going on everywhere and everything else. And if you're Australian, you take Tim Tams, you're an instant hit in the room. So we're dishing out Tim Tams and stuff, And they went, great job, everybody. Now, here's what we want you to do. We want you to take that 5-minute talk, and we want you to cut it down to 3 minutes. You've got 45 minutes. Cut it down to 3 minutes. Don't lose impact, and get a better score. Now, that sounds hard, but we all did it. And everyone delivered their 3-minute talk, and the average score was 8, and the talks were way better, and we were so excited, and more Tim Tams and a lot more high-fiving and hugging now. And they said, great job, everybody. Take that 3-minute talk, you've got 45 minutes, and cut it down to 60 seconds. And don't lose impact, and get a better score. Now, everybody actually did a great job, but one woman delivered a 5-word talk, and she brought the house to its feet. And her talk was, I beat cancer with dignity. Now, we don't need to know anything else, do we? Because her 5-minute talk had how she felt when she was diagnosed, and they told her, and her family's feelings, and that sort of stuff. She could have a 5-minute talk. I survived cancer with dignity. So 5-minute talk, and brought the house to their feet. Got a 10 out of 10. You need to be able to explain your value that fast. What's the thinking behind it? How have you whittled it down? What's the sweet spot? I don't let people have more than 3 words in the sweet spot. Because if you've got more than 3 words, you're losing them, right? So the harsh line of reality is, where are you at today? And a little bit of home play out of this is, what do you want those numbers to be in 12 months' time? So you put your target down for today and you go, what do you want those numbers to be in 12 months' time? But here's a tip. If you're trying to move more than 2 points on that scale on every measure over 12 months, that's probably unrealistic. Unless you move 1 or 2 of them and they have such significant impact that they drag the rest along with them. So you're looking for the most powerful levers in there. It could be systems, depending on your business. It could be the conversion mechanism, depending on your business. But you won't just through your own hard labour shift all of those measures. Some of them will drag the others with them. So you need to think your way through that as a structured thinking tool and go, okay, what do I want the numbers to be? And what's going to lead that charge for me out of those 8 kind of key areas or key indicators, if you like. Now, if you're in startup, it will be sales. But if you're in a mature business, it may very well be systems and the performance of your team. So you need to create some that you want a big jump in, and then measures that you want the others to lead through. And then you simply break the year up into one key focus for each quarter. So the focus for a quarter could be conversion. Focus for another quarter could be lead acquisition. Focus for a quarter could be performance, team performance. So just one focus for the quarter and how you're going to measure that. It's a really simple planning tool, but a way to stay on track for the year. And then when you come into the 90-day, I know that you guys do like a 90-day planning thing, it really helps sharpen that thinking. That makes some sense. So I know we need to wrap it up. Is there time for me to take one or two questions if people have got it, and then we'll take a break. But any questions at all out of anything we've covered? And is that useful? Is it useful information to have? It's because we're really quite convinced that the more we can shift the thinking into visual models, mental models that help you structure, and then into sales, you can dramatically shift your business. Yep.
I've seen models that are sort of linear.
Yep.
Or they're linear and they have little boxes underneath it.
Yep.
You've got circles. Is it different?
Yeah, sure. So the question was, models are linear sometimes, or a drop-down flow chart, and with the main line across the top, and then the subsets of steps underneath. And I've got circular models. I actually have models of all shapes. So when it comes to models, there's a method for that. There's a system behind models. So it's geometry, content, and choreography. So I will often, if I'm facilitating big workshops, you need to actually let people sit in the tension for a while. So if you're facilitating a conversation, you need to create an environment where people get frustrated by the conversation. Because without that frustration, there's no energy to solve it. And if you create frustration, you create a level of energy, we just want to get the answer now. So when you're facilitating a workshop, I structure up to afternoon tea, 3/4 mark. I structure the day to just frustrate the hell out of people. And by afternoon tea time, they're going, we need to pin this down. I go, it'll be fine. It'll all work out after the break. And normally, after the break, I'll go to the whiteboard and say, I can draw this for you. And I've had many occasions where I've gone to the whiteboard and put the pen on the whiteboard and I still don't know what I'm going to draw. But a model pops out from the conversation. And I always start with geometry. So shapes tell a story. It's one of the rules of influencing, which you'll see after the break. So a 3-circle Venn diagram is an additive model. It's an additive geometric shape. And by that, I mean it... You add all the parts in and you get a whole, but if you only add 2 parts in, you'll still get some positives, right? Whereas a triangle is holistic. Take one side away, the whole thing collapses. A continuum is comparative, comparing one end to another. A 2x2 matrix, a box divided into 4 quarters, is comparative. So the geometry tells a story and gives a dynamic to it. The geometry decides how many dimensions you get to operate through, how many variables are in play. There's a whole lot of... And so you use the geometry to structure the thinking. So that geometry drives you down to thinking in 3s. Now, 3 is a bit of a magic number in human psychology. So that geometry deliberately drives you into 3s. People say, can I have 4 accelerators on any of the circles? The answer is no. Clear your thinking up and get it down to 3, and then have symmetry around it. Then the second thing is content. And that's often best if you facilitate it out of the group you're working with. So the content of that was facilitated out of the marketplace. And then the third thing is it's the choreography. It's how you deliver the model. And so the way I delivered that was really deliberate. Started in the centre, moved outwards. Most people want to talk about their business and move inwards. Most businesses want to say, you need to sell successfully, you need to move your market, blah, 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 serve impeccably and scale intelligently. And if you do, here's what you'll get. It just doesn't have the same power. So it's geometry, content, and choreography. Is that okay? Helpful? Yeah. Yeah. You don't... Sorry, go on. That's it? Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the moment you draw people in. Now, when I deliver this, I normally hand draw it. It's much more powerful if you're hand drawing it. And imagine this in one of those animated cartoons on your website, hand drawn. We get people to do that a lot. But when you draw people in. And when you put a visual in front and you unpack it, you draw them in as well. And it's stories and pictures sell. And a model is a story inside a picture. And that's kind of where the power comes from. And as you tell that story inside the picture, people just want to hear the rest of it. So if I'd got to this point and said, we're running out of time, Stephen needs to wrap it up now, there's 3 more under Scale Intelligently. We don't have time for that today, but if you come and see me at the break and give me your email address, I'll give you the rest of them. How many email addresses would I collect? Right? It's a visual open loop. So one of the keys to great copywriting is open loops. Leaving an unanswered question in the customer's mind. Your headline should leave an unanswered question in your customer's mind. And so visual models allow you to have open loops. I could just pretend I'd run out of time, which I actually have, but I could just pretend that I've run out of time and go on, come and give me your email address, I'll post the model to you. The other thing you might notice about these, which is important in terms of the story, you want lyrical language all the way through. You want words and language in there that have the same rhythm as the model. So there's actually a whole lot of science behind what I've just talked through with you. There's a whole lot of science behind it in terms of why it works and how it works. Now, I know that we've got to go to a break. So I'm going to let Stephen come up and wrap us up for the break, and we'll come back and look at sales after the break.
Wonderful. Round of applause for Simon.